I was still at my desk when my phone buzzed. It was nearly 5:30 p.m., the sun setting through the tall windows of my office. My daughter, Emily, should have been home from her after-school art class by now. She always texted me before she left, usually with a photo of whatever painting she had finished. But tonight, nothing. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, all I heard was the voice of a stranger, trembling. "Are you Jessica Carter? Emily's mother?" My stomach dropped. "Yes, where's my daughter?" "There's been an accident. She's at St. Anne's Hospital. You need to come immediately." I don't remember dropping the pen in my hand or knocking over the files on my desk. I only remember the sound of my own pulse in my ears as I grabbed my bag and ran. By the time I reached the parking garage, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. The 20-minute drive to St. Anne's was a blur of red lights and near collisions. I don't even know how I got there without crashing myself. When I pushed through the sliding doors of the emergency ward, I spotted my sister Claire pacing in the waiting area, tears streaking her face. "They hit her, Jess. Some idiot in a sports car. Emily was crossing at the light and he just..." Claire broke off, covering her mouth. My knees nearly gave way. "Is she alive?" "She's alive," Claire said quickly. "She's in surgery. Broken arm, cracked ribs, a concussion. But she'll make it." For a second, relief flooded me, enough to let me breathe. Then the anger came. Hot, consuming. "Who was driving?" Claire hesitated. "Witnesses said it was a black Maserati. They got the license plate." She lowered her voice. "Jess, it belongs to Kyle Morrison. The CEO's son." I froze. Kyle Morrison, 22 years old. Known around town for his flashy cars, wild parties, and endless scandals that always disappeared within days. And of course, his father, Richard Morrison, the untouchable billionaire who ran Morrison Global. The man who donated millions to campaigns, had judges on speed dial, and controlled half the city like a puppet master. I had crossed paths with Richard Morrison once before at a fundraiser. He was charming on the surface, but the kind of charm that coated venom. And now his son had nearly killed my daughter. A detective in a worn gray suit appeared, introducing himself as Detective Harris. His face told me everything before his words did. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted you to hear this from me. We traced the car. Witnesses saw Kyle Morrison get out and run, but..." He hesitated. "But what?" "His father's already brought in a team of lawyers. They're claiming Kyle wasn't driving, that it was a case of mistaken identity. Without physical evidence, it's going to be difficult." I felt the blood drain from my face. Difficult? My daughter was lying broken in surgery, and they were talking about difficult? "Detective," I said slowly, carefully, "are you telling me the Morrison family is trying to erase this?" He gave me a tired look. "I'm saying Richard Morrison has influence. He's done this before. Cases vanish, charges dropped, witnesses change their stories." For a moment, the room spun. I gripped the edge of a chair, forcing myself not to collapse. In my career, I had learned how to keep control of my emotions, how to stay composed even when everything inside me was burning. But this was my child. I swallowed hard. "Thank you for being honest with me, Detective." He nodded, apologetic, then walked away. I sat down in the cold hospital chair, staring at the wall. The rage inside me wasn't wild anymore. It was cold, sharp, precise. I had buried a part of myself years ago, choosing a quieter life for Emily's sake. I'd built a career as a corporate consultant, left behind the world I once knew. The world where I had learned how to fight battles most people never saw. But now those instincts stirred again, whispering to me. When the surgeon finally came out and said Emily would pull through, I thanked him, but my mind was already moving elsewhere. Not on healing, but on retribution. I stepped into the corridor, dialed a number I hadn't used in years. When the voice answered, gravelly and cautious, I said, It's Jessica Carter. I need a favor. There was silence, then a low chuckle. Jessica, I thought you'd gone soft. Not anymore, I said. I want everything you can dig up on Richard Morrison. His business, his contacts, his son. I want leverage, every dirty secret. Careful, the voice replied. That man owns half the court system. I looked back toward the room where my daughter lay, fighting for her future. My voice hardened. Then he's about to learn what it feels like to be powerless. That night, as the monitors beeped softly beside Emily's bed, I made myself a silent promise. Richard Morrison thought money could erase consequences. He thought his son was untouchable. But he had just picked a fight with the wrong mother. And in the morning, he would realize who I really was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside Emily's bed, listening to the steady beep of the monitors, memorizing the rise and fall of her chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights, heard the screech of tires, imagined her small body thrown to the pavement. By morning, the rage inside me had sharpened into something colder. I had spent my career navigating boardrooms full of arrogant executives who believed money insulated them from consequence. But Richard Morrison had crossed a line. He wasn't going to bury this under legal paperwork. Not this time. Not with me. At noon, after Emily was resting comfortably and Claire promised to stay with her, I drove downtown. Morrison Global's headquarters loomed over the city like a glass fortress. 40 stories of steel, glass, and arrogance. The lobby smelled of polished marble and power. The receptionist smiled politely until I said, "I'm here to see Richard Morrison." "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Tell him it's about his son Kyle," I said, my voice steady. "And my daughter Emily. He'll want to see me." Something flickered in her eyes. She picked up the phone, murmured a few words, then nodded reluctantly. "Mr. Morrison will see you. Top floor." The elevator ride was silent, but my thoughts were deafening. This wasn't about negotiation. This was about setting terms. When the doors opened, I stepped into an office so large it could have been a showroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, and at the center of it all, behind a sleek mahogany desk, sat Richard Morrison. He didn't stand. He didn't even offer a handshake. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, a glass of scotch in his hand, studying me like I was a minor inconvenience. "Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly, "I'm sorry for the unfortunate situation with your daughter." Unfortunate situation? My voice was ice. "Your son ran her down in the street and fled." He waved a dismissive hand. "Alleged. And even if Kyle was involved, he's young. Boys make mistakes. Accidents happen." I stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated by his practiced charm. This wasn't an accident. This was negligence. Criminal negligence. His eyes hardened. "Mrs. Carter, I understand you're emotional, but let's be realistic. Even if charges were filed, which they won't, my son is untouchable. I own the city's courts. Judges, prosecutors, politicians. They all answer when I call." There it was. The arrogance. The sneer beneath the tailored suit. He believed it. He really believed his power made him immune. I leaned over his desk until I was close enough to see the faint lines of age at the corners of his eyes. "You have no idea who you're talking to." He smirked. "I know exactly who I'm talking to. A mother, a consultant, a woman who doesn't understand how this game is played. Take the insurance settlement my lawyers will offer and move on with your life." I checked my watch. "You have 10 minutes to call the police and turn Kyle in. Full confession. No deals. No excuses." For a heartbeat, he stared at me in disbelief. Then he laughed. A deep, mocking laugh that echoed against the glass walls. "Or what?" he taunted. "You'll sue me? Post angry messages online? I've crushed men twice your size for half as much insolence. You think you can threaten me? I straightened, my expression calm. 9 minutes? 40 seconds. His laughter grew louder. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Security? But before his guards arrived, his office door burst open. A man in a tailored suit rushed in, his face pale. Morrison's lawyer. Richard? The man said, his voice low and urgent. We have a problem. Morrison scowled. Not now. Yes, now. The lawyer snapped, sweat beading at his temples. He held up a tablet with trembling hands. The judge you own? He just announced his sudden retirement this morning, effective immediately, and Detective Harris filed for a new warrant, signed by a judge we don't control. Morrison's smirk faltered. That's impossible. The lawyer's voice dropped to a whisper. They have traffic camera footage, private security feed, clear as day. Kyle behind the wheel. They're coming for him. The room fell silent except for the hum of the city outside. Morrison's arrogance wavered, replaced by the first glimmer of fear. I looked at my watch again. 6 minutes left. The lawyer swallowed hard, then turned to me. Mrs. Carter, please. We'll follow your terms. Kyle will turn himself in. Full cooperation. Just stop this before it goes further. I met Morrison's eyes. You thought money made you untouchable. You thought power meant protection. But you forgot one thing. Real power doesn't come from fear. It comes from consequences. As I walked out of that office, leaving Richard Morrison in stunned silence, I felt something I hadn't felt since the accident. Control. For the first time, the fight wasn't just mine. The dominoes had already started to fall, and there was no stopping them now. When I left Morrison Global that afternoon, I didn't drive straight back to the hospital. Instead, I pulled into a quiet parking lot 2 blocks away and sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Richard Morrison had laughed in my face. He had treated my daughter's life like an inconvenience, something to be settled with insurance money and a signature. But those 6 minutes changed everything. The moment his lawyer burst into that office, pale and panicked, I knew his empire wasn't as invincible as he believed. The truth was simple. Men like Morrison thrived on silence, on people giving up, on fear. But I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, after Emily finally drifted off to sleep, I opened the secure laptop I hadn't used in years. Most people saw me as a consultant who managed corporate restructures. What they didn't know was that my consulting career had been built on something deeper. Before I became a mother, I had worked as an analyst for a private intelligence firm. My specialty wasn't just contracts and negotiations. It was data, networks, leverage. The things people didn't want seen. And Richard Morrison had plenty he didn't want seen. The first call I made was to Aaron, an old colleague who now ran a cybersecurity outfit in Chicago. Jess, he said, surprised. I thought you'd gone legit. I had, I admitted. But I need a favor, discreet, fast. He hesitated. Who's the target? Richard Morrison and his son. There was a long pause. Jess, that man is dangerous. He's got government contracts, judges in his pocket. If you poke at him... I'm not asking. I cut in. Emily's in the hospital because of his son. They're already trying to bury it. I won't let that happen. Aaron sighed. All right, send me what you've got. I'll dig. By midnight, he'd already sent me the first report. It was worse than I imagined. Shell companies, offshore accounts, suspicious payments to a judge who had dismissed Kyle's DUI the year before. Donations to politicians routed through fake nonprofits. It was a web of corruption, and every thread led back to Morrison. I organized the files carefully, labeling each piece of evidence. This wasn't about destroying him recklessly. It was about precision. If I wanted to win, I had to do it the right way. One undeniable fact at a time. The next morning, Detective Harris called me. His voice was heavy with frustration. Jessica, The DA's office is dragging their feet. They're saying the witness statements aren't strong enough. Without direct evidence, they won't move forward. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the documents glowing on my screen. What if you had more than witness statements? What if you had financial records tying Morrison to corrupt judges? What if you had security footage of Kyle behind the wheel? Harris was silent for a moment. If we had that, everything changes. But how could you possibly— Don't ask how, I said firmly. Just be ready to act when I deliver it. When I hung up, I thought about the risks. I was stepping into dangerous territory, and I knew it. But the image of Emily's bruised face kept me steady. She deserved justice. I wasn't going to let another victim get erased by money and power. That afternoon, Aaron sent me a secure file. Inside was gold, clear footage from a private security camera near the intersection where Emily had been hit. It showed the black Maserati running the light, Kyle's face illuminated by the glow of the dashboard. There was no mistaking it. I forwarded the footage to Harris with a single line. Check your inbox. 9 a.m. tomorrow. That night, I met with Claire in my kitchen. She had been quiet since the accident, but when she saw the files spread across my table, her eyes widened. Jess, what are you doing? What I have to, I said simply. Morrison thinks he owns this city. He doesn't own me, and he doesn't own justice. Claire touched my hand. This is dangerous. People who go after him, they don't win. I looked her in the eye. Then I'll be the first. The following morning, true to my word, Harris received the evidence. His voice on the phone was alive with energy I hadn't heard before. Jessica, this is it. The footage, the car, even the payments to Judge Conway. It's airtight. I can move on this. Good, I said, because this is only the beginning. As I hung up, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Richard Morrison had laughed when I gave him 10 minutes. He thought I was powerless. But now the storm was gathering. And when it broke, it wouldn't just be over him. It would sweep away everything he thought untouchable. By sunrise, Detective Harris had called twice. The first time, he thanked me for the video. The second time, he reminded me it couldn't come from me if it was going to survive a defense challenge. I need the original source, Jessica, he said. Chain of custody matters. If defense can argue it was tampered with, it dies in court. I understand, I said. Call First Main Bank's security director. His name is Leon Park. I already asked him to preserve the footage. He'll respond to a subpoena. Harris exhaled. That helps. I'll get the paperwork to him within the hour. While Emily slept, I stood at the window and watched the parking lot lights blink off one by one. Hospitals run on the math of minutes. Dosages, vitals, rounds. Courtrooms do too. Deadlines, filings, hearings. If I wanted this to hold, I had to be patient and precise. By mid-morning, Harris texted, Bank produced original. Subpoena satisfied. Warrant signed for the car. Another message followed with a location pin to a private garage on the west side. It wasn't a raid like in the movies. 2 uniforms, a locksmith, a clipboard. They photographed everything. The Maserati's front right quarter panel told a story. Fresh paint, misaligned bumper tabs, a spidered headlamp. Lab will match the lacquer fragment we found at the scene, the evidence text said, sliding a labeled envelope into a lockbox. We also pulled the EDR, event data recorder. Shows a hard break from 52 down to 0.4 seconds after the light turned red. I didn't speak. I just looked at the car until my own reflection in the glossy hood blurred. It should have been the last thing Emily saw before blacking out. Harris touched my shoulder. We're moving, Jessica. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. At noon, the DA's office announced a conflict of interest and requested a special prosecutor from the neighboring county. It sounded bureaucratic, but it was important. Richard Morrison's donations had seeped everywhere in this city. A prosecutor with no ties meant fewer strings to pull. 30 minutes later, Judge Conway, who had tossed Kyle's DUI last year, recused himself from all Morrison matters. He didn't resign. He simply stepped aside. Fine. I didn't need his resignation. I needed him out of the way. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Carter, this is Hugh Benoit, counsel for Richard Morrison. I'm calling to discuss an immediate civil resolution. We can structure a package that covers medical, pain, and suffering. Future? No, I said. He paused. You haven't heard the number. I don't need a number. Miss Carter. He tried again, voice softening. You're under a lot of stress. A settlement spares your daughter a lengthy process. Trials are unpredictable. Public, cruel. Your client is the cruelty, I said. Put your offer in a letter if you have to. I won't read it. The tone changed, just a hair. Off-the-record advice. Be careful what you stir up. I recorded the call, logged the time, and emailed the file to Harris with 2 sentences. Attempted civil pressure. Slightly veiled threat. For your records. At 3 o'clock, Harris called back, voice wired with motion. Kyle's counsel reached out. He's surrendering at 6. There'll be a bail hearing in the morning. The news didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity. Emily's CT scan showed a clean trajectory for recovery, but she tired easily, and her left arm throbbed when the meds wore off. When she woke, she asked if the person who hit her was sorry. I told her I didn't know. I told her we were making sure he faced what he did. Like how you make me take responsibility when I forget my homework? She asked. Exactly, I said, and kissed her forehead. Rules are for everyone. At 5:30, I left the hospital and drove to the courthouse. I didn't intend to watch Kyle turn himself in. I wasn't sure I could trust my face, but I needed to be near the machinery that had started moving. The evening air was sharp, the kind that makes your lungs aware of their work. A black SUV pulled up to the Sally Port at 6:07. A young man stepped out in a navy suit and ankle boots too stiff for his posture. For a second, I saw a boy who had never been told no. Then I saw Emily's bracelet on a tray, cut off in the emergency room. I turned away. On my way back to the garage, a shadow detached from a pillar. Richard Morrison. No entourage, no performance lighting. Just a man who hadn't slept and didn't know where to put his hands. You're making a mistake, he said. You think this ends in a courtroom? It ends with 2 ruined families. It ends, I said, with accountability. Your son will have lawyers, a judge, a chance to speak. My daughter didn't get any of those chances in the crosswalk. He glanced past me toward the courthouse doors, and for the first time, his certainty cracked. You've made powerful enemies. I don't need friends, I said. I need facts. I walked to my car and locked the door before my hands started shaking. I waited it out, counted to 30, then drove to a diner a few blocks away. Harris met me in a booth with coffee that tasted like burnt bread. There's more, he said quietly. Body shop manager called us. Says he was asked to accelerate a repair and to keep a separate set of invoices. He brought the messages. We're protecting him and his family. Obstruction? I asked. Maybe. We'll take it one step at a time. That phrase, one step at a time, followed me back to the hospital. Claire had coaxed Emily into eating half a bowl of soup. The room was dim and mercifully ordinary. I washed my hands, sat, and listened to the monitor's patient metronome. I texted Aaron a single word. Thanks. He sent back a thumbs up and nothing else. Good. The less we said, the better. Before midnight, the special prosecutor filed 2 motions. One to preserve all Morrison Global communications related to Kyle for the last 72 hours, and another to prohibit contact with witnesses, including me. I read them on my phone in the blue hospital light and felt a kind of relief that has no celebration in it, only breath. I wasn't winning. I was simply keeping the process intact long enough for it to do its job. When Emily stirred, I took her hand. She blinked at me, sleepy and stubborn. Am I still brave, Mom? You're the bravest person I know, I said. And tomorrow we keep going. She closed her eyes. The room settled. Somewhere across town, a young man sat in a holding cell. A father sat in a quiet house that used to feel like proof, and a judge reviewed paperwork that would decide a morning. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. We were finally moving at the speed that matters. The bail hearing was the first time I saw Kyle without tinted windows or headlines. He looked smaller than I expected, pale under courtroom fluorescence, fingers worrying his cuff. Claire squeezed my hand. The special prosecutor laid out the basics. The bank video, the car's data recorder, the body shop messages. No theatrics, just facts. Kyle's attorney didn't fight the evidence. He asked for release with conditions. Judge Alvarez kept it measured. Serious injury to a child, flight from the scene, efforts to conceal. Bail is granted with strict conditions: surrender passport, GPS monitoring, no driving, no contact with witnesses. She looked at Kyle. Any violation and you will be remanded. He nodded, eyes on the table. At the hospital, Emily was propped on pillows, tracing a bookmark. Did the judge say he has to apologize? She asked. Not yet, I said. Court is slow. It's supposed to be. Weeks passed in small, useful markers. Lighter jackets, longer evenings, Emily laughing without wincing. I worked part-time while the kettle whistled. The lab matched the paint. The EDR report was finalized. The body shop manager's messages were authenticated. A grand jury indicted for felony hit and run causing serious injury. Richard Morrison stayed mostly off stage. His lawyers faced microphones. A business journal said the board was reviewing governance. A month later, he stepped down to focus on family. Not handcuffs, but a consequence. The kind he'd said would never reach his side of town. In August, the prosecutor called. We're discussing a plea, she said. Guilty to the felony, will recommend 3 years, 18 months in custody, the balance suspended, 5 years probation, restitution, license revocation, and community service speaking to new drivers. You have the right to be heard. Will he admit what he did? I asked. Yes, on the record. What about his father? Separate matter, she said. We're still evaluating obstruction. The plea hearing was quiet. Kyle stood, voice shaking, and said, Guilty. He described the light turning yellow, pressing the accelerator, the thud, the panic, the running. He said my daughter's name. He said he was sorry. I don't know if it would mean anything to Emily, but I needed to hear it. The judge accepted the plea and set sentencing for October. I wrote my statement until the words felt like bone. On the day, I kept my voice even. Your Honor, accountability is the point. My daughter crossed on walk. She did what we teach. An adult chose to break that rule, and when harm came, he chose to run. I don't ask for a sentence that ruins a life. I ask for a sentence that teaches him, and everyone watching, that rules are for everyone, especially when no one is there to clap. The judge chose her words. Mr. Morrison, your age and acceptance of responsibility weigh in your favor. Against you are the flight, the injury, and attempted concealment. The sentence, 36 months, 18 to serve, 5 years probation, full restitution, license revoked for 5 years, and 200 hours of community service in driver education. No cheer, no gasp, just chairs scraping and papers sliding into folders. I stepped into sun and felt steadier. The next day, a certified letter arrived. Richard Morrison's counsel proposed a pedestrian safety grant in Emily's name at her school. I set it on the counter and made tea. Later, I forwarded the proposal to the district with one condition. A third party must administer it, funding crossing guards and driver education for 3 years. If they agreed, fine. If they didn't, also fine. We were past gestures. In September, Emily returned to art class. She chose blues and greens and asked me to stay for the first 10 minutes. When I stood to leave, she pressed something into my palm, her bracelet repaired with a new clasp. "Can you wear it today?" she asked. "Every day," I said. I still see the intersection when I drive through town. I still measure yellow lights with the caution I didn't used to have. But the city feels different, not because power changed hands, but because good people did their jobs. A detective who didn't look away, a banker who preserved a file, a technician who cared about lacquer fragments, a judge who kept her voice steady. At dinner one night, Emily asked, "Are we done, Mom?" "We're not broken," I said. "That's the part that matters." She nodded and went back to her mashed potatoes. I looked at the repaired bracelet on my wrist and thought about rules, mercy, and the work it takes to make consequences real. This wasn't revenge. It was responsibility, paid in the only currency that counts. The truth carried all the way to the end.